The first time Xander Reese met the alien student assigned to observe him, he was elbow-deep in a car engine, swearing at a rusted bolt under the unforgiving sun of Nevada. "You are hemorrhaging from your dermis," said a voice behind him. Xander jerked up, hitting his head on the hood. "Jesus! Don't sneak up on people like that." The alien, a spindly creature with smooth, metallic blue skin and large, expressive eyes, blinked slowly. "My apologies. I am Vetra. I have been assigned to you for the duration of my field study." Xander wiped a streak of oil from his forehead and looked at the small gash on his arm. "This? Just a scratch." "You are bleeding?" Vetra said again, scanning him with a narrow device that looked suspiciously like a stapler. "You require medical assistance." "Nah, it's just skin," Xander said. "Happens all the time." Vetra tilted his head. "Humans are dramatic." Xander laughed. "Says the guy who nearly called an ambulance over a paper cut last week. That was an unfamiliar sensation. It warranted concern." Vetra watched as Xander wrapped a dirty rag around his arm with a practiced motion. "That is unsanitary. It'll be fine." Vetra recorded something on his tablet and mumbled, "Exaggerated reaction to mild discomfort. Tendency toward bravado. Unnecessary minimization of bodily trauma." Xander tossed the wrench into the toolbox. "You know I can hear you, right?" Vetra didn't respond, but he looked vaguely skeptical, which Xander had already learned was Vetra's default setting. At first, it was mildly amusing, Vetra shadowing him at the garage, taking notes on everything from how humans dealt with minor injuries to how they handled stress, anger, even hunger. The alien was part of an interspecies exchange program hosted by the Galactic Cultural Embassy, and Xander had been selected as a human behavioral subject. According to the official pamphlet, it was a mutually beneficial educational opportunity. Xander wasn't sure who was benefiting yet. 2 weeks into the arrangement, Vetra had already concluded that humans were emotionally unstable, inconsistent, and obsessed with caffeinated beverages. Then came the incident at the quarry. It was a Saturday. Xander and a few friends had taken Vetra out to the old rock pit on the edge of town, where they liked to ride dirt bikes. It was meant to be a fun day, but fun, in Xander's world, often came with risk. Xander gunned his bike up a steep incline, hit a rut, and launched off the edge of a rocky shelf. The bike twisted mid-air. He landed too hard on the uneven ground below. Something cracked in his leg. He lay there for a moment, blinking up at the sky. Vetra's voice was suddenly close, urgent. "You are not moving. You have sustained an injury." Xander clenched his jaw. "Yeah. Think I broke something. You must remain still." Assistance is required immediately. Xander's friends had already called an ambulance. Vetra hovered beside him, scanning frantically. "It is fractured," Vetra said. "Your tibia shows a disruption in continuity." "Great," Xander muttered. "I was hoping for a sprain." He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. The pain was sharp now, radiating up his leg like fire. "You are not overreacting," Vetra said slowly. "No," Xander said through his teeth. "I'm trying not to scream." Vetra crouched beside him, observing silently. When the paramedics arrived, Vetra didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched as Xander's leg was immobilized and he was lifted into the ambulance. At the hospital, Xander underwent imaging. The doctors confirmed a mid-shaft tibial fracture. Clean break. 6 to 8 weeks in a cast at best. Surgery wasn't needed, but he'd be off his feet for a while. Vetra sat stiffly in a chair beside the hospital bed. "You minimized your pain response," Vetra said after a long silence. "You did not vocalize distress proportionate to the injury." "Didn't exactly feel like putting on a show," Xander said. "You knew it was serious," Vetra continued. "Yet you attempted to remain calm. You downplayed it." "I was in the middle of nowhere," Xander said. "Freaking out wouldn't have helped." Vetra looked at him for a long moment, then added, "I must revise my observations." The next few weeks were slow. Xander moved around on crutches, his leg encased in a thick blue cast. Vetra followed him everywhere, now more careful, more observant not just of his physical condition, but of the little things. How Xander flinched when stepping down unevenly. How he didn't complain when the pain flared at night. How he apologized when he couldn't carry a box of tools or reach something on a high shelf. Vetra logged it all. One afternoon, while Xander was propped up on the couch with a heating pad over his knee, Vetra spoke without looking up from his tablet. Your species does not over-dramatize. It often underreports pain. Glad you figured that out, Xander said, sipping lukewarm coffee. I have reviewed hundreds of cases across the exchange network. Human subjects routinely report lower pain scores than objective scans suggest. You are not anomalies. You are consistent in this behavior. Xander looked at him. Maybe it's pride. Or maybe we just like to pretend we're tougher than we are. Vetra considered that. It is illogical. But it's human. One day, just as Xander was starting to walk again without the crutches, Vetra asked to accompany him to a local MMA gym. Xander had been trying to rebuild strength in his leg, and the gym doubled as a physical therapy space. Vetra observed a sparring match between two fighters in their 20s. One took a solid punch to the ribs and dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. He waved off the trainer, insisting he could continue. He is injured, Vetra noted. Probably bruised a rib, Xander said, watching closely. Yet he continues. Xander nodded. That's how some of us cope. Keep going. Push through it. Even when it causes further damage. Yeah. Vetra watched for a long time, then said, this explains much. Later that week, Vetra asked Xander if he could conduct a small experiment. A simulation of injury perception, he called it. Xander agreed, albeit hesitantly. The simulation involved a mild electric pulse to simulate nerve pain, followed by a virtual reality display of visual injury. Vetra wanted to compare Xander's physiological reactions to those of other species. Xander gritted his teeth through the simulation, his vitals stable despite the pain. When it ended, Vetra looked both surprised and unsettled. You suppress discomfort instinctively, he said. I wouldn't say instinctively, Xander replied. Just trained. You learn to shrug it off. For better or worse. Vetra didn't speak for a while. Then he said, I once believed your species was emotionally excessive. Now I see you are emotionally layered. Xander raised an eyebrow. That's a fancy way of saying we bottle stuff up. Yes. The final weeks of Vetra's study passed quickly. Xander's leg continued to heal, and with time he was able to walk normally again. Vetra went with him to his final checkup, where the doctor cleared him for moderate activity. Bone is healing well, the doctor said. Give it another month before you go back to heavy lifting or writing. As they left the clinic, Vetra remained quiet. At the garage, as Xander slowly hoisted a light tool bag onto the workbench, Vetra finally spoke. I underestimated your species. Xander looked at him. That's all right. Takes time. I thought you exaggerated everything. Emotions. Pain. Reactions. But I was wrong. Xander shrugged. We do exaggerate sometimes. But not the important stuff. Vetra nodded slowly. I will recommend that the Academy adjust its curriculum. There is more to your species than we believed. Xander gave a small grin. Glad to be of service. Vetra turned to leave, then paused. Xander, when your leg was broken, and you joked about it. Why? Xander thought for a moment. Because it hurt like hell, and laughing was the only thing I could do about it. Vetra blinked once. That makes sense. And with that, the alien walked out into the desert sun, leaving Xander to his work, his legs still aching a bit, his pride intact, and the garage blessedly quiet for the first time in weeks. The embassy shuttle arrived with a high-pitched whine and a plume of dust that made Xander sneeze twice into his hoodie sleeve. The parking lot behind the garage was barely big enough for it, but the pilot didn't seem to care. The vessel settled with a mild shudder, its doors sliding open to reveal a trio of distinctly non-human figures stepping out, each one more awkward-looking than the next. Xander leaned against the side of the building, arms crossed. His leg was out of the cast now, stiff but functional. He still walked with a limp when tired, but he didn't like making a thing of it. Let me guess, he said, watching the three aliens approach. More observers? Vetra stepped forward, flanked by a tall, gelatinous figure whose translucent form shimmered like gasoline in water, and a squat, angular being with arms that seemed jointed in the wrong places. Both wore the standard glossy black translator bands around their necks, smooth collars pulsing faintly with sync tones. "This is HRN," Vetra said, gesturing to the gelatinous one, "and this is Kill. They're part of the second wave analysis group. They have reviewed the preliminary findings and wish to conduct supplemental studies." "Supplemental," Xander echoed. "That's a fancy way of saying y'all didn't believe your own data." "We believed it," said HRN, the translator rendering their voice as a distant, echoing whisper like someone speaking underwater. "But we did not understand it." "Well," Xander said, pushing off the wall, "you're in for a treat. I've got a guy coming in with a busted water pump who's been driving around for 2 days overheating his engine. You can watch him apologize to his truck before he apologizes to himself." Kill's head, if it could be called that, swiveled slightly. "Is this typical?" "Wait and see." The morning dragged on. The water pump repair took longer than expected since the part was aftermarket and didn't quite fit, and the customer, a wiry man with too much sun damage and not enough common sense, kept insisting he could just top off the coolant for now. Xander let him talk himself into silence before laying out the probable consequences: a cracked head gasket, a warped engine block, and a tow bill he wouldn't like. All the while, the three aliens observed. Vetra stayed back, arms folded, occasionally inputting notes. HRN hovered, literally drifting a few feet above the ground, its form trembling whenever the air compressor kicked on. Kill, meanwhile, fixated on everything from the way Xander wiped his hands to how the customer flinched when told the price of the part. After the customer finally left, red-faced and muttering, Kill approached. "Your interactions include subtle verbal conflicts. Yet you maintain a calm exterior." "That's called customer service," Xander said, blowing air through his teeth. "You can't throw a wrench at someone just 'cause they're annoying. Not unless you want to get sued." HRN pulsed a soft mauve. "And yet your heart rate increased." "Sure," Xander said, grabbing a rag. "Doesn't mean I acted on it." "You regulate your biological responses for social cohesion," Kill noted. "Among other things." By lunch, Xander was exhausted. The limp had returned. He sat on a milk crate with a sandwich in one hand, the other rubbing the side of his leg. "You are in discomfort," Vetra said plainly. "Yeah," Xander replied. "It's been a long day. You conceal it." "I'm sitting down, aren't I?" Kill leaned in. "Why not request aid?" "Because it's not that bad." HRN shifted colors again, something between concern and confusion. "Your species continues to engage in tasks despite inadequate recovery. This seems maladaptive." "Maybe," Xander said. "But things don't stop just because we're hurting." "Explain," Kill said. Xander took a bite of his sandwich before answering. "Let's say you've got rent, kids, bills. You can't just lie down and wait for pain to pass. You work through it. You do what you can. Even if it deteriorates your condition?" HRN asked. "Yeah. Sometimes, especially then." Vetra's eyes narrowed slightly. "This is the part we still struggle to quantify. The decision to continue harmful behavior out of necessity or obligation. Call it stubbornness. Call it survival. Either way, we don't always get to choose the timing." Later that afternoon, a new sound cut through the buzz of tools, a low rhythmic thudding followed by a sharp cry. Xander looked up just in time to see Miguel, the part-time assistant, collapse near the back of the garage, clutching his hand. "Damn it," he grabbed the muffler pipe, Xander muttered, rushing over. Miguel's hand was already blistering, skin pink and starting to bubble. He tried to stand but wobbled and went down again. "Sit still," Xander said, guiding him to the ground. "That's a second-degree burn if I've ever seen one." "What were you thinking?" Miguel gritted his teeth. "Didn't think it'd be hot yet?" "It's always hot." From behind, the aliens loomed quiet still. "Get the first aid kit," Xander said, not looking up. Vetra moved immediately. Kill hesitated but followed. HRN hovered silently, observing every twitch of Miguel's face. Xander applied the burn gel gently, wrapping the hand in a loose, sterile bandage. "You're going to the clinic. This'll blister bad." Miguel nodded, his jaw clenched. "Don't try to play tough," Xander added. "Tell them it hurts. Don't shrug it off." Miguel gave a weak nod. After he was picked up by his cousin, the garage fell into a strange quiet. "He did not vocalize distress," HRN said. "He minimized the injury," Kill added. "He was in obvious pain." Vetra said. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Xander replied. That's normal here. But why? HRRN asked. There was no shame in requesting help. No punishment. Doesn't matter, Xander said. We've got this idea, don't be a burden. Don't complain. Keep going. Kill's translator emitted a low chime. We have reviewed over 63,000 hours of species-specific footage. No other sapient life form exhibits the specific combination of pain suppression and continued function. Congratulations, Xander said. You found our weirdest feature. Vetra looked at him. It is not weird. It is remarkable. And troubling. Both can be true. By sundown, the garage closed. The aliens lingered, hesitant. What now? Xander asked. We will submit our revised findings, Vetra said, and recommend a new classification for human pain response. It is not exaggerated. It is often concealed and underestimated even by your own kind. Xander nodded slowly. Do you think it's a strength? HRRN asked. Sometimes, Xander said. Sometimes it's just how we survive the day. Kill blinked. We must study further. Sure, Xander said, tossing his rag onto the bench. Bring snacks next time. I'm not explaining all this again without snacks. The aliens exchanged a glance, if it could be called that, and Vetra finally said, understood. They boarded the shuttle quietly, leaving Xander alone in the dimming light, his leg aching again, but the silence oddly satisfying. 3 days later, the garage smelled like scorched rubber and mint chewing gum. Xander had just finished replacing a timing belt on a Civic that looked older than the town's mayor when the embassy van reappeared, humming low and parking with the deliberate slowness of someone trying not to offend the gravel. Kill stepped out first, this time carrying a slim case that looked like it might contain stolen blueprints or a musical instrument. HRN followed, undulating in a slower, more deliberate rhythm than before. Vetra came last, his expression unreadable but his posture more upright than usual. Is this another study? Xander asked, wiping his hands with a towel that had seen better decades. No, said Vetra. It's a follow-up. Informal. You don't do informal. Today we try. Kill placed the case on the workbench and opened it. Inside was a compact diagnostic unit, sleek, iridescent, and humming faintly. Next to it sat a cylindrical device topped with a clear dome housing a suspended sphere of blue liquid. You planning to fix me? Xander asked, eyeing it. Kill looked up. We wish to understand something still unexplained. I thought we explained everything already. You demonstrated behavior under stress, said HRN. Now we assess baseline function. How you endure normal discomfort. Without situational urgency. You mean you want to know how I feel when nothing's on fire? Correct. Xander sighed and sat down on the stool by the bench. All right. You got 5 minutes before someone walks in asking why their car smells like syrup. Kill handed him a thin band. This monitors your nociceptive pathways in English. It tracks how much pain you're in. Then why not ask? We did, said Vetra. You lied. Xander raised a hand. Whoa, I didn't lie. I just didn't elaborate. Same result. He slipped the band onto his wrist. It buzzed faintly, then tightened slightly. The readout on Kill's device lit up with a cluster of fluctuating lines. Left leg, residual ache, Kill said. Grade 2. Moderate inflammation around the medial ridge. Sounds about right. Why are you walking unassisted? Because it's manageable. You are masking a limp. I've got work to do. HRN rotated slowly. You do not consider this worthy of correction? I've already done the healing part. What now? Stay home another week? I'd go insane. Kill studied the screen. There is also cervical tension. Trapezius strain. Lumbar stiffness. Yeah, well, lifting radiators solo will do that. You did not report this earlier. I didn't think I had to. Vetra stepped closer. You accept discomfort as background noise. Pretty much. That is not a universal trait. I figured. Kill tapped a setting on the monitor. The band pulsed again. We will ask you to rate this sensation from 1 to 10. My leg. No, the band pulsed again, stronger. A sharp, focused heat bloomed across his forearm. It wasn't burning, but it felt like holding a cup of too hot coffee too long. 4, Xander said. Kill looked surprised. Others rated that a 6.7. Others aren't me. The pulse faded. Now this, Kill said, adjusting a dial. A dull ache spread through his lower back, like he'd been sitting too long on a hard bench. It was familiar. 2. That is not minor. I've had worse. Kill powered down the device. You normalize pain by comparing it to personal maximums. Don't most people? No, said Vetra. Most species rate pain by biological thresholds, not emotional memory. Xander shrugged. We learn where a line is by crossing it. HRN hovered closer. What would be a 10? Xander considered. Compound fracture. Open. Bone pushing through skin. Or maybe kidney stones. Stones? Kill asked. Yeah. Tiny rock-like things in your body. Try to exit through narrow tubes. It's not fun. HRRN's form rippled. Your species contains internal minerals that cause agony? Sometimes. Voluntarily? No. It's not on purpose. Kill leaned back. You live in hostile biology. Xander chuckled. You're not wrong. Vetra handed him a small data slate. Would you mind writing a subjective description of your last severe injury? What for? To compare your perception to biometric data. He took the slate, thought for a moment, then started to write. Sharp pain, radiating. Immediate instability. Leg was useless. Felt like it was humming inside. Not in a musical way. In a this isn't supposed to be happening way. He handed it back. Kill scanned it silently. No mention of fear, Vetra said. I didn't have time for fear. That is not typical. Xander rubbed his wrist where the band had been. You keep saying that. Kill closed the case. Your species prioritizes function over wellness, even when it exacerbates damage. Because if we waited for perfect health, nothing would get done. You sacrifice comfort for momentum. Sometimes comfort isn't an option. Vetra nodded. We understand now why your kind is difficult to treat. You present late. You minimize symptoms. You self-medicate. You're catching on. HRN shifted hue. You joke to deflect. Only when I'm being studied like a frog in a jar. Kill powered down the diagnostic unit. We have sufficient data. We will reclassify your pain model to reflect behavioral complexity. Well, Xander said, standing slowly, glad I could help you redefine suffering. Would you consider resting more? Vetra asked. Would you consider not hovering while I'm welding? Unlikely. Xander stretched his back. Then we're even. They remained a few more minutes, watching as he replaced a corroded battery terminal and explained why baking soda worked in a pinch. They asked no further questions, only observed in quiet fascination. When they finally left, the sun was dipping behind the distant ridge. Xander locked up, rolled his shoulder once, and walked toward his truck with a slight hitch in his step. He paused, turned, and called after them, next time you run those diagnostics, try it on someone who's never had to work through a fever and a double shift. Vetra raised a hand in something like acknowledgement. Back inside, Xander sat on the stool and unlaced his boots, one at a time. He glanced at the empty bench where the diagnostic unit had been and muttered under his breath, hostile biology, huh? He looked down at his leg. It throbbed faintly. Not bad. Manageable. He reached for the heating pad behind the toolbox and plugged it in, stretching out his leg as it warmed up. He didn't need to prove anything anymore, not to aliens, not to himself. But he still had a radiator to fix in the morning, and that was reason enough to get some rest.